Father Steve, Episcopal priest, serving here in the Episcopal Diocese of Maryland. And we're going to take a look we're studying the Gospel of Mark. And we're going to begin on this recording session, chapter 4 of the Gospel of Mark. So go ahead and read Gospel of Mark, chapter 4. And then come back and we'll get into a few of my notes and we'll get into a discussion, more particular out of N.T. Wright's book. So go ahead and read chapter 4 of the Gospel of Mark. And then we'll come back to us. Okay, welcome back. So a few of my notes on the Gospel of Mark. Jesus teaching the mystery of the kingdom of God in parables. So Jesus teaching in parables. Jesus using parables, a simple story used to illustrate. In the case of Jesus, he used planting because his audience was mostly an agrarian population, besides fishermen. Here, Jesus uses the planting of seeds. And we look at verse 8, a great bumper crop, 30, 60, and 100-fold. That's a great bumper crop. Verses 11 through 12, the secret of the kingdom, the plan, is revealed to the 12, Jesus' inner circle. Verse 15, the struggle with Satan continues. And then verses 18 through 19, the lure of wealth. So let's take a look and see what N.T. Wright has to say as we get into chapter 4, the parables of the kingdom. I've always enjoyed listening to good choirs. I've even, on rare occasions, sung in one or two, in fear and trembling lest my amateur ability should reveal itself by a raw note, a fluffed entry, or that dread moment for all irregular singers, keeping the sound going a second too long after everyone else has fallen silent. When you audition for a choir, often the conductor will ask you to pick a note out of a chord. Here is a chord of 3, 4, or 5 notes. You can hear it all together, but can you hear the notes individually and sing each in turn? It's often quite a test. Something like that is involved in learning to read Jesus' parables. So kind of an icebreaker he has here. If you were composing a song about your personal life, what would it be like? What a question. Okay, so you may not get through all these questions I'm going to throw out to you. But anyway, this is the first question. Verses 1 through 20. This parable is often interpreted as illustrating different ways individuals respond to the gospel. And there's some truth in that, especially as it offers a picture of Jesus' own ministry. Yet, as Jesus and his listeners well knew, the Old Testament frequently uses the image of a vineyard or field or garden to represent Israel, and harvest to represent God's dealings with it. For example, Isaiah chapter 5 verses 1 through 7, chapter 37 verse 27, and Jeremiah chapter 26 verse 18, and Ezekiel chapter 16 verse 2 and verse 7. If we take this line of thought, what might Jesus be saying about the past, present, and future of Israel through this parable? I know some of these questions are going to be kind of like thought-provoking, long, maybe you want to skip. That's okay. You can do that. So we'll go into, you know how to pause this. So we'll go into the second question. All right? As we've seen in Mark chapters 1 through 3, Jesus has already attracted a good deal of negative attention. He has been challenged by authorities about forgiving sins, his attitude toward the Sabbath, and feasting with sinners. His family has said he is out of his mind, and religious leaders have said he is possessed by the devil. As we look at Mark chapter 4, verses 11 through 12 in this context, why might Jesus not want some listeners to understand what he is saying? Why do you think he doesn't want some of the listeners to understand it? Okay, another question. The problem, and this seems to be the main reason Jesus taught in parables, is that Jesus' vision of how God was sowing his word was, as we should say today, politically incorrect. People were expecting a great moment of renewal. They believed that Israel would be rescued lock, stock, and barrel. God's kingdom would explode into the world stage in a blaze of glory. How does Jesus' parable offer a different vision of Israel and its future? How does his parable offer a different vision of Israel and its future? Okay, moving right along. What preconceptions about how God is supposed to work today might actually prevent us and others from welcoming God and his word? So what preconceptions about how God is supposed to work today might actually prevent us and others from welcoming God and his word? Kind of before I go any further, I went by a church sign today, and I had to think, I thought, maybe, I don't know, the theology is a little bit different than my theology, but the sign said, "Come in sinners, leave winners." I'm thinking, okay, so that means once you leave, you're not a sinner anymore, you're a winner? I can somewhat understand the concept behind that, but I'm thinking, come in sinners, leave winners. You know, if you want to discuss that, you can. See what you think about that. Just throw that out to you. So now we look at verses 21 through 34, and more particular verses 21 to 25. What are the promise and the warning found in Mark chapter 4, verses 21 to 25? What are the promise and the warning found in Mark chapter 4, verse 21 through 25? And then when we look back, how do these carry on themes found in verses 1 through 20? Okay, like I say, zoom ahead, go back. I don't know exactly where the timestamp is on these questions, but you can try to figure it out yourself. So here is a question. Verse 25. The traditional translation of verse 25, "The measure you give will be the measure you get," has inspired all sorts of reflections, including a whole Shakespeare play, Measure for Measure. By the way, I like Shakespeare. About the meaning of justice. Here Jesus seems to be telling his followers that the level to which they pay attention to what he's teaching them will be the level at which they will receive the benefits of the kingdom. Okay? Now, how can we go more deeply into Jesus' teachings? How can we go more deeply into his teachings? Well, one of them is what you're doing right now. If you're doing this as a group, you know that's the best way to do Bible study as a group, right? But this is one of the ways you can get more deeply in his teachings. Now we're going to look at verses 26 through 29. What's the significance of the farmer sowing seed and not knowing how it grows in relation to the coming of God's kingdom? What is the significance of the farmer sowing seed and not knowing how it grows in relation to the coming of God's kingdom? Y'all pretty much get that. Always beware, right? Always beware. Okay. Moving right along. Now, kind of a long preface in this question would be verses 30 to 32. Though Jesus' ministry in Galilee doesn't look like the sort of kingdom of God movement people were expecting, it was, in fact, the seed time for God's long-promised and long-awaited harvest. When Jesus asked, "What shall we say God's kingdom is like? What picture shall we give of it?" his words echo Isaiah chapter 40, verse 18. The prophet asked a similar question about God himself. To what will you liken God, or what likeness compare with him? Now verses 30 to 32. What aspect of God's kingdom does the mustard seed parable emphasize? So what aspect of God's kingdom does the mustard seed parable emphasize? Okay, moving along. This might be the last question here. Other Old Testament echoes come at the end of the story. The birds of the air make their nest in the shade. Ezekiel and Daniel both use this as an image of a great kingdom, growing like a tree until those around can shelter under it. We see that in Ezekiel 17:23, 31:6, and Daniel chapter 4, verses 12 and 21. Jesus was happy for people to listen openly and be curious about what he was saying, to have those on the inside ask for more and go more deeply, as it's suggested in Mark chapter 4, verses 10 through 11. Sometimes we feel the pressure to explain the whole gospel all at once to people. I say putting all your eggs in one basket, right? How might we instead help them become curious and be motivated to go more deeply into what Jesus is all about? How might we instead help them become more curious and be motivated to go more deeply into what Jesus is all about? Okay, so there we go. That's the study of the 4th chapter of Mark's Gospel. And I hope you're enjoying these series that I do. Again, I'm Father Steve, Episcopal priest serving here in the Episcopal Diocese of Maryland. 2-point charge. I serve St. Andrew's Episcopal Church in Clear Spring, Maryland, and St. Thomas Episcopal Parish in Hancock, Maryland. And as a person used to say, if you're in your neighborhood, stop on by. Look us up. Look up the Facebook page. Look up the social media, and you'll find us one way or the other. So anyway, God bless.